Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Fractured Realities. In everybody's life, there's that one point that's like an epiphany, a turning point, something that propels you on a course throughout your life. And a lot of times in different groups and with different people I discuss things with, a lot of people talk about near-death experiences, and they ask me, "Have you ever had a near-death experience?" And, my answer is, yeah, I have. Well, can you describe it? I always kind of ventured away from it. It's something that's kind of, number one, it's hard to explain. And number two, it's something that's kind of a difficult thing for me to talk about. But I've decided that I'm going to share it. If it helps people, it helps them. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But this is the truth. This is what happened to me. And a lot of details here are gonna be gross. They're I'm unfiltered. I'm not gonna clean it up or candy coat it or bullshit people about what happened to me. I want to be perfectly honest and tell you guys what I experienced. And maybe if you want to go on the comments and share what you experienced, that's great. My entire life, I've always sought out a spiritual path. And yeah, up until that time and that date, and was it February February 12th, 2000, I'd always kind of considered myself, borderline Christian. I always wanted it to be true. I always wanted to die and fly with, sexy big tittied angel chicks on a cloud and, chill the fuck out playing a harp and smoking a bowl with Jesus. But, it always seemed kind of far fetched and crazy to me. But at that time, that's, I still held out that little bit of hope, and people talk about their near death experiences and where they go through a tunnel and they see their loved ones or an angel pulls them aside and shows them visions of hell. And well, nothing like that happened to me. um, Now there's always going to be skeptics when it comes to this. There's those people that are going to say that maybe this was a dream, or this was an imaginary flash in your mind. And hey, that's always possible. But what happened to me felt very fucking real. Felt more real than this reality that I'm in right now. And it really did change the way that I conducted myself, conducted my life, the way I thought. That was definitely a turning point for me when it came to cleaning myself up from addiction. Um, and I'm not going to go deep into that subject. Possibly on another video, I'll share that as well. But at that time, I was, on several different kind of drugs and drug cocktails. And once again, the skeptics were going to say, "Yeah, that was why." But just, I'll explain to you what happened to me, and you can be the judge. Okay, so it was early one night. At that time, I'll give you a little background. Um, I was living in a double apartment with my two-bedroom apartment with my friend James, who I'd known, since we were young kids. Um, and I had the absolute worst landlord of all times. But at the time, I was working at a pizza shop. I was managing the pizza shop at night, and my friend James worked for the same place. He actually was a delivery guy. But like I said, I had the world's worst landlord. I believe he was Serbian. I'm not sure, but he would just randomly I'd wake up in the middle of the day and there's this big fat Santa Claus looking guy standing in front of me and you got the rent. I'm like, well, not right now, Frank. Not good, not good. Uh, like literally, the nostrils, hair in his nose bouncing all over the place and shit. I'm laying there in my fucking underwear with morning wood trying to shoo him off so I could get to my fucking money. He was horrible. And also when it came to fixing things, and I got a leak in my kitchen ceiling. So I made the mistake of calling Frank and telling him, hey, you need to fix this leak. So he brings over, I believe the guy was a crackhead, a maintenance man who obviously worked on the cheap. And instead of checking the roof for the leak, they cut the entire ceiling out of my kitchen. Like literally. So I woke up and looked into my kitchen and there were tarps and water buckets everywhere. It was a shit show. And I'm like, okay, well, what the hell am I gonna do here? And then he calls me on the phone a couple hours later and says, okay, you got to leave. I'm like, well, fuck, Frank, I just paid rent. I'll return your rent. You have to go. You can't stay. It's unsafe. So I had to find a new apartment on the quick. And my friend James talked to the owner of the pizza shop's son. His name was Scott. And Scott had a rental property. Now, the rental property was an old bar. It was a place called the Brooklyn Tavern, and it they lost the liquor license. So what he did was he built a couple bedrooms on, but it still had all the bar and all the stools and the two bathrooms, and had it for 300 a month, I think, with no deposit. I could just move in, and so being in my 20s, the answer was like, yeah, fuck yeah. So I was living at this place, and while I lived there, I attracted the party people. I had definitely a lot more friends back in that day than I do now. But yeah, everybody was around. It was good times. Had strippers but then the drugs came in and everybody got addicted to something. Everybody had vices. Me myself, I had several. I was drinking like a fish every day. I was doing several different kind of drugs. So when I describe the scene here, I'm just trying to kind of set the ambiance. I lived there for a couple of years at this point, and yeah, I was pretty bad. But so it started off. My roommate at the time, I was on my third roommate. His name was Jonah. He he distributed narcotics. I won't mention his last name. I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble, but so he had, you know, decent amount of cocaine on him, and he wanted to party that night. And I told him, okay, well, I don't necessarily want to do it. I wasn't a big cokehead. I was never really into it that much, but I agreed to do a line. And his other friend came and threw a little more in, and this line ended up being a Scarface monstrosity, probably about 6 to 8 inches long and about an inch thick. And being the fucking retard that I am, I said, okay, yeah, well, fuck, I'll give it a shot. So I blasted this out and went over to. I realized that my grandmother was in town from West Virginia at the time, so I wanted to go visit with them, which was the most embarrassing, scary, crazy shit just coked out of my mind trying to talk to my grandmother, sweating profusely the whole time. Well, I made it out and they didn't never mention that I was acting weird, but I'm sure they knew something was up. But the reason my grandmother was in town was because my aunt was getting married and I was throwing her reception at the bar slash apartment that I lived in. So, I went and visited with her and I came back and there were probably 20 or 30 people there. Now, another guy that I let come and stay with me because we had three bedrooms, his name was Justin. Justin at the time was 19 years old and he had stomach cancer. So Justin was given less than a year to live. He had which was probably a big mistake by the doctors, but Justin was given an open prescription for Oxycontin, morphine, just Percocets, Vicodins. He had just any kind of pill you can imagine. He had just prescriptions for him, and it was all paid through Social Security. So he never had to pay a dime for it. And a lot of people, I never asked him to share any of his medication because I thought it was him. I let him stay there with me so that he could have his own place and have a life and have some fun before he passed from the world. So that's just saying it. So there were those two, and then several other friends. My friend Jason, who had just moved out, but he was still kind of hanging out there too. And his cousin Keith was there as well. And well, long story short, I went over to my mom's house. I came back and immediately started drinking because drinking like a fish was just natural. Like my Nas. It was just this was a beer or liquor or whatever you could imagine. And of course, pot. We're smoking pot all night. I had a couple Percocets because at that time I had a serious opiate addiction, so I was a fly. But I did so. I was on two Percocets, and I after that insane amount of cocaine, I probably did 4 or 5 other lines after that. Um, Smoked pot. I was drinking, and then all of a sudden I felt like real relaxed. Like fuck, man. Like I'm all hopped up. I should be fucking bouncing off the damn walls doing a Macarena on the fucking bar, but here I am feeling dizzy and lightheaded and kind of tingly. And I look over at my friend Justin, and Justin smiles at me, just big cheesy smiles. How you feeling? I'm like, I feel fucking weird, man. I'm like, what's going on? So he looks at me. He's like, "You're welcome." I'm like, "Wait, I'm welcome for what? What's going on?" He's like, "Yeah, I hooked you up, man." Like, what do you mean you hooked me up? And he pointed over at my bottle of beer that I'd been drinking. It was down almost to the bottom. And I looked at it and I tasted it, and it tasted a little better. And I'm like, "Dude, did you put something in my drink?" He's like, "Yeah, dude, I hooked you up." And what he had at the time was it was liquid oxycodone. It was the injectable kind, but he had it in the vials. And what he'd done is he dumped 2 of those into my beer. So Justin wasn't, he didn't use Coke. So he didn't even know that I'd been doing cocaine that night. So on top of cocaine, I was on a double dose of synthetic heroin as well as other opiates. So I sat there and just started freaking out. I'm like, fuck, do I go to the hospital? What do I do? This is the shit that killed fucking Jim Belushi and several other stars. But in the end, I just sat there like a fucking idiot and didn't do anything or think anything about it. And suddenly my heart starts racing. Like, boom, in my chest like a fucking machine gun. Then it would slow down like and I could feel my chest getting like real sore and burning. I'm like, fuck, man. Is my heart about to pop? What's going on here? So I stood up and looked at everybody and said, I'm going in my room. I'll probably be dead in the morning. That was my literal words. And they thought it was a joke. They literally laughed. Ha ha ha. All right, go to bed, you fucking weak ass. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I knew that my aunt was going to be there in 4 hours for, well, 4 or 5 hours to drop off things for a wedding reception that night. So I knew I had to get some sleep anyway, but I seriously, honestly didn't think I was going to live. And obviously, that's the night it happened. So I go in my room and I lay down, and just the minute I laid down on the mattress, I started just getting my entire body started feeling tingly, like not like a good tingly, like an ecstasy buzz or anything like that. It was like a bad tingly, almost like I had a bunch of little tiny bees stinging me everywhere. Like my whole entire body inside and out was getting tattooed at the same time. And I didn't know what was going on. And so I tried to get up and move, and I couldn't. Like literally, I got like real super dizzy, and I couldn't even fucking move my head. Well, that's the first thing that happened, and then my faculties started shut down. Then the next thing I know, that's when I couldn't hear anything. I'm trying to hear people outside and possibly try to yell to them that, something's fucking wrong with me, get an ambulance. But I couldn't speak. I couldn't hear anything. I'd open my eyes and everything was a blur. But then I'm laying there with my eyes wide open and everything just goes black. I couldn't fucking see anything. And I felt my breathing slowing down. And I could literally hear my heartbeat in my fucking head just could. It was very weak, but it was loud enough to echo. Um, Here's where it gets kind of strange, and this is pretty gross. But if anybody knows anything about what happens when somebody dies, this happens. You lose control of your bodily function. So I literally I urinated on myself. I luckily I didn't eat a lot that night, but yeah, there was a little bit of stool as well that was released. And then just suddenly my entire fucking body went into a spasm. Like I guess it was like a seizure. And I clenched up, and when I did, I clenched my teeth together so hard that it actually chipped two of the teeth in the front. And like literally my hand stayed in a fucking ball and I couldn't move like this. My eyes were probably wide open at the time too, but and just the most intense pain, and then all of a sudden it was gone. It was like a relief. It swept over me, and I started to hear voices, and I'm like, well, what the hell is this? And there were several of them. I don't know how to describe it. There was like hundreds of voices around me, and each and every one of them were talking about me, almost like a round table discussion. But I could hear each and every one of these voices clearly. And then I felt really, really cold all of a sudden. And I could barely move my head. And I looked down and I seen that I was in this very dark place. And I could see my feet. I could barely move my head. I couldn't move anything else. It's like almost like my arms were pinned across, and I couldn't lift them. No strength, no nothing. But I could move my head. It's almost as if I could see all the way around me, which might not make sense, but I could see what was going on all the way around in the room, even though I couldn't move. Um, I don't know how to describe it. That's what I mean. This is very difficult to describe. And I just keep hearing all these voices. And then I realized that I was laying on some sort of like stone type slab, almost like an altar of some sort. There was something standing behind me with uh, some sort of like black robe almost. I couldn't see a face on it. It couldn't see the hands, but I felt him because he kind of reached forward and he clutched my head. And then I noticed that all these voices are coming from these other strange beings, I guess, whatever you could describe them as. I didn't see facial details, anything like that, but I could see their shapes moving in these little alcoves. So it was like this big giant cave, and there were little cutouts in the cave and in the stone, and these beings were standing in them, and there were several layers. I mean, it just went up. There were hundreds of them, and it was literally super maddening to hear all their voices at once and understand what they were saying, and it freaked me the fuck out. So I fought with everything that I could fight with, and I bounced out of it. Then I'm there. I am back in my room, and I'm shivering, and I'm fucking shaking, and I can't hear, I can't see. I can just feel my body fucking, you know, convulsing, so to speak. And then boom, I slip back. Suddenly, I'm back in that place. Except now, I see a really old man and a really young man with dark hair, like black eyes. The old man just looked like a normal old man. I have no idea who he was, or I have no idea what either one of them were. But they're discussing, and all these beings all over the place, and these alcoves, this big giant cave amphitheater thing that I was in, discussing my life and if I should stay or I should go. And then every time the old man, more voices spoke of the fact that I should stay alive, he would take a step forward. And then the young man would take a step forward every time they said that I should go. So, I don't know. But one thing I did realize, and it was just a pure horror second, is I did not want that short, dark haired young motherfucker to reach me first. So, I mean, I fought, but I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. All I could hear was just absolute judgment. Hundreds and hundreds of voices judging me, speaking about my life. Some positively, some negatively, but a million voices in your head is just insane. And at this point, I couldn't escape. I tried to go back, and even that reality where I'm shaking and shivering and convulsing and pissing on myself and literally dying was more pleasant than this place that I was. Well, there was no fire, no brimstone, no demons, no devils, no angels, no light, no relatives that I knew or people that I understood. But I was just in this fucking frightening place. I didn't like it. I just in my mind I call it the chamber of judgment. That's the only thing that I can describe it as. But then these things kept, this old being and this young being just kept coming towards me closer and closer, and I knew that my time was up. I didn't know what would happen next. I had no idea what would happen next. All I knew was I didn't want that young motherfucker to be there. I didn't want to stay there. I wanted to go back. All of a sudden, regardless of all the depression or all the bad times or despondency or bad relationships or horrible things that happened in my life, I realized at that moment that I wanted to live. I wanted to stay alive. I didn't want to be in this fucking place. I did not want to end it here. I didn't want to be some dead fucking junkie laying in my room. Just another statistic to add to the dozens and dozens in Cleveland. I didn't want that to be my fate, and this is all I could think. Well, at the same time, I'm hearing all these different voices and this fucking thing standing there clutching my head. And then, as they're getting closer, one of the hands that were on my head, this big robed creature, put his hand up like this, like a stop sign to the old man and to the young man, and they both stopped. Just completely blank expressions. They weren't happy, they weren't sad. And then he said, "Not yet." And then I heard him. He leaned over me like this and he whispered down. I still couldn't see a face. I couldn't see eyes. I couldn't see anything. Just a black robe and a shadow. He said, "Not yet." And then he put his hand back on my head like this and he said, "Wake up." And he moved my head. Well, when I woke up, I heard pounding. It was almost like I was in a well. My mouth was full of vomit. Um, I was choking, but the vomit just spewed out. I mean, all over the side of my bed, all over, the garbage can, the sheets, the pillow. It was a fucking horror show. But if that wouldn't have happened, I probably would have choked to death on that vomit. This was 4 hours later, and I hear pounding on the door. It was my grandmother, my aunt, my mom delivering supplies for the reception. So I told him, hey, I'm kind of in a weird place right now. Do you think you can give me like 5 minutes? I ran to the bathroom. I vomited again. I went and I checked on the news. I had like 7 or 8 people crashed. I found 2 other people, by the way. My ex roommate Jason was there. He was choking to death on his fucking vomit. I moved his head, or he probably would have died. And my friend Keith, his cousin, same deal. So all 3 of us would have been dead if my parents wouldn't have knocked on that door, or if I wouldn't have snapped out of what was happening. And that day, literally, I tended bar, and my friend Jason helped me tend bar. And all day long, around amongst all my friends and family and people that I grew up with, I'm sweating and running into the bathroom and vomiting, and we're just taking turns doing this. I mean, it was god awful. Just sweat, shakes, bone aches. If anybody knows anything about opiate use, you get when it starts to leave your system, it leaves your system from the bone marrow. So literally, it hurts from the inside. It's god awful. But yeah, somehow I got through it, and at that point in my life, that's when I became more of an agnostic. I say, okay, there might be a God, there might be a devil, but that's not what I experienced. That's not what happened to me, But there is something. There is real. There is life after death. And any coroner will tell you that when you die, your body loses 4 ounces, and that's what a soul weighs: 4 ounces. 4 ounces of electricity, of energy that leaves your body, that your spirit leaves. And maybe this was all just an illusion. Maybe this was just my overactive mind. Maybe I didn't die at all. Maybe it wasn't a near death experience. I know I came close to death. Did I really die? Did I really go to that place? I'll never have those answers. But one thing I do know is I do appreciate life. And not too long after that, I got my shit together. I always suck out a spiritual path. I've always been involved with the occult and things like that, but I wasn't necessarily. It made me a less angry person, a less self-destructive person, because I tasted death, and it was not pleasant. You know, Death was a dirty burger full of salmonella that I didn't want any part of. Um, I Not too long after that, I hooked back up with a woman who I was, you know, just enamored with at the time anyway. And we ended up getting married. I ended up having 2 kids. Of course, that didn't work out. I ended up getting a divorce a few years later, but that's, another story that you probably don't want to hear. But anybody who tells you that there's just blackness, there's nothing after you die, has obviously never experienced these things. Um, Perhaps we create our own death reality in our mind. Maybe there is nothing. Maybe there isn't an afterlife, and maybe that neuron, that last little piece of information in your brain that's still firing as the body dies or the soul leaves, maybe what you think you manifest. So maybe if I thought seriously that there was a hell, it would have been hell, or maybe a heaven. But to me, it just felt like people trying to judge me, which is something I've always had a problem with in my life. I don't like to be judged. I try not to judge other people, and I don't like to be judged myself. So maybe to me, that was my hell. Maybe I did go to hell, or maybe I went to heaven and they were judging me. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not claiming to have the answers here. I just wanted to share this with you so that I can explain to people why I feel the way that I do, why I seek out the unknown, why I try to keep in touch with worlds beyond ours, why I study the things that I do, why I experience the things that I do. You never know how much you love life and appreciate life until you feel it seeping out of you. And that's the truer words were never spoken. So, enjoy life, love life. But for those of you who are contemplating suicide, those of you who don't care about life, or that think that, regardless of what happens, because you go to church and you read a book that was written a few hundred years ago by a bunch of monks, that you're going to guarantee go to this wonderful place with clouds and angels and be happy and content forever and sit next to the big sky wizard, I think you might be a little off. So I think you should enjoy your life. You should live for now. You should be a decent person because you will be judged. Judgment does exist. That much I can say for sure. So live your life, enjoy your loved ones. Don't let every little thing become a catastrophe in your life to where you don't give a fuck and you get to the point to where I got, where living and dying didn't really matter so much as enjoyment, you know. So that's my point, and I hope that somebody listening to this can take something from it, or if anybody's had a NDE near death experience and it's similar, you could share it. If it's not similar, you could share it. Um, but yeah, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think. I'd look to hear other people's opinions. I've heard a lot of hellfire and brimstone, and I've heard a lot of heaven, but I haven't heard anybody who had an experience like myself. So if there's anybody else out there, please do share. All right. Thank you all. And, like I said, I love you all and I don't judge you. So my past is my past. I'm clean. I'm sober. I'm not suicidal. I'm healthy. Um, so, the past is the past. Let's leave it there and not make all kinds of stupid comments. Yes, I know using drugs is stupid. Cocktailing drugs is double stupid. All right. Thank you all. You have a good night. And for those of you who stuck it out here to the end with my rambling, I do appreciate it. Thank you all. We'll talk again soon.